The advantages of Model 2 architecture over Model 1 architecture are very clear. All the Java code is in the servlets, and the JSPs, which are the views, are only responsible for displaying the screens. So there is a very clear division of responsibilities between the controller, which are the servlets, and the view, which are the JSPs. This resulted in very maintainable applications. We were really using Model 2 architecture for a long term, for a long time, and then there came a small evolution in the Model 2 architecture, which is called the Model 2 architecture or the Modified MVC Architecture, where instead of the servlets being directly hit from the browser, there was something called a friend controller introduced. So in the Model 2 with friend controller or the Modified MVC with friend controller architecture, what happens is all the requests from the browser go to a single servlet, which is called the friend controller. And the friend controller would look at the URL or some parameter, and it would then decide which controller to redirect to. So the architecture is very simple. From the browser, all requests go to a single controller or a single servlet, which is called the friend controller. And the friend controller would then decide which controller to invoke. So it decides which controller to invoke, and it invokes that controller. The controller would get the model back and come back to the friend controller. The friend controller, based on the information which is given by the controller, will redirect to a view and generate the HTML and then return it back to the browser. So the friend controller is kind of the most important part in the Modified MVC architecture. What happens? User clicks something on the screen. The request always goes to the friend controller, irrespective of what the user wants to do. So it goes to the friend controller. The friend controller would look at the request and decide which controller to invoke. So is it controller 1, is it controller 2, controller 3, which one? So it sends the request to the appropriate controller. The controller would talk to the business logic. So it will talk to the Java part and make the model ready. So it makes the model ready, and then it would also tell to the friend controller which view to render. So the controller would come back with two things. One is the model. The second one is friend controller. Probably view 1 is the right thing to show. So then the friend controller would execute the view 1, giving it the model. It creates the HTML and sends the HTML back to the browser. Let's look at a simple example now. What we are looking at right now is an example from our Spring MVC project. You are looking at the configuration of dispatcher servlet. This is a Spring MVC servlet. So if you look at dispatcher servlet, it extends HTTP servlet. So it's basically a normal HTTP servlet. But the thing is, this dispatcher servlet, when we are using Spring MVC, acts as the friend controller. So all the requests which come in always go through the dispatcher servlet in Spring MVC. So if you look at web.xml, in any of the Spring MVC applications, the only servlet which would be configured is the dispatcher servlet, because all the requests would go through the dispatcher servlet. The dispatcher servlet, based on the URL, let's say the URL which comes in is update to do. The dispatcher servlet would then call the appropriate controller for that particular thing. So based on the URL, the dispatcher servlet would decide which controller method to call. So if the URL comes to be update to do, then this method would be called. If the URL comes to be delete to do, then this particular method is called. So dispatcher servlet decides which controller method to call based on what's in the request. If you look at the documentation of the dispatcher servlet, you'd see that dispatcher servlet handles a lot of things. It decides which controller to invoke. This is called handler mapping. So which handler to invoke, that's decided by this dispatcher servlet. Which view to redirect to and how to identify the view to redirect to, that's decided by the dispatcher servlet. If you look at the to do controller, it just returns back to do. So it's just saying to do. But how do you really map this to do to a view? That's decided by the dispatcher servlet as well. That's also called view resolver in Spring MVC language. Dispatcher servlet can also add in a little bit of exception handling to the Spring MVC applications. Dispatcher servlet also provides internationalization. That's based on the locale, decide what language to use in the application. And also it provides a theme resolution strategy. So you'd see that this dispatcher servlet, because it's the central part, the front controller dispatcher servlet is the central part. So we are adding a lot of things around this so that you don't really need to worry about it in the controllers. So all the things like view resolution, handler resolution, exception handling, internationalization handling, that is locale, all these features are implemented by the dispatcher servlet, thereby all the other controllers don't need to really worry about them. That's the most important advantage of the front controller pattern. This kind of becomes the central part, and you can implement the most important functionalities in there so that I don't need to implement the same functionalities in all the controllers. That's the front controller pattern, or the dispatcher or the modified MVC pattern. The most important thing to remember about this modified MVC pattern is the front controller. So every request first hits the front controller, and the front controller then makes all the decisions about how to handle this particular request. Thanks for joining more than 1 million students who are learning from us. In 28 minutes, we defined a learning roadmap for Java and front-end developers. We created more than 25 courses covering all the topics that you are seeing on the screens. There are 4 things you can do to make best use of these courses. Number 1 is Udemy. You'll find a link in the description of the video to our Udemy profile. We are teaching a lot of courses on Udemy, and most of them are free. Number 2, visit our website www.in28minutes.com. You'd find tons of information, including how you can register for our trainings and the link to Udemy and our GitHub code as well. Number 3, visit our GitHub repository. With more than 20 repositories covering varied examples, it's a comprehensive source of information and code. Last but not the least, you'll find a set of discount codes for all our Udemy courses in the description as well. Feel free to use them. Good luck from the team here at In 28 Minutes, your destination for high quality step-by-step courses.